Three, two, one. Florida State is 9-0 and officially 2023 ACC championship bound. The Florida State Seminoles will be heading to Charlotte in early December. Florida State takes down Pittsburgh 24-7. A kind of a slow start there, definitely. Right off the bat, no points were scored by any team, but in that second quarter, Florida State puts up 10. Pittsburgh has 7 going at halftime. And then after that, Florida State's defense, as it did throughout the game, stays solid, not allows any points in the second half. Adam Fuller cooked up a nice second half plan, and Florida State put up 14 in the third quarter, and that pretty much put it away. No points on the board at all from any team in the fourth. So Florida State 24-7. With me this evening is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer and game preview guy for the 2023 season. And then down below is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief. Gentlemen, your thoughts on this game?
I know what the stat sheet says. I refuse to believe Florida State had 500 yards of offense. Just makes absolutely zero sense. And early on, there's definitely some questionable decisions between Norvell's play call on fourth down, Travis holding on to the ball and taking a sack instead of throwing it away, flea flickers. There's a lot of that, but you get out of there with the win. All of us were way off on the predictions, and we're going to go down in the standings for FSU beat. But it was a weird game.
Yeah, weird is I think that's just saying the least that you can about this game. I mean, and same thing with you calling it a slow start, Logan. I mean, it was an abysmal start for Florida State, especially on offense coming out. First six drives of the game produced no points for the Seminoles. You have a turnover on downs in the red zone, multiple 3-and-outs. Obviously, the fumble on the opening possession of the game from Lawrence Toafili. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and this is also obviously with Johnny Wilson and then Keon Coleman, who was a late scratch, and this one out of the lineup. Florida State without their 2 top receivers. It looked ugly, but I mean, credit to them for finding a way to pull it together there late in the second quarter, doing enough in the third quarter there with some big plays from Kyle Morlock, Marquise Douglas, and obviously Trey Benson with that 55-yard run to kind of ice things there. But I mean, this one was within doubt for a lot of this game, and I think you do have to give Florida State some credit here. I mean, obviously going up against an overmatched opponent, but at least on offense, without 2 of your top playmakers, still find a way to get it done, still find a way to, like Austin said, somehow get 500 yards of offense. Jordan Travis throws for a season-high 360 yards without Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman in the lineup. It was a strange game. Florida State is 9-0. Survive in advance.
We got to give a lot of credit to the defense. Conrad Hussey gets a pick. Fentrell Cypress strips Pitt's receiver running into the end zone. So instead of a touchdown, it's a touchback. Another forced fumble there at the end of the game. Pittsburgh was 0 of 10 on third downs. This was a win for Florida State's defense more than it was Florida State's offense. As many yards as they had, as much production as Jordan Travis had, this was all about the defense.
Yeah, defense came to play. Also, too, Conrad Hussey forced fumble as well. That kid is going to be very, very good during his career at Florida State. Absolute stud, but just giving some credit here to some guys that stood up, that needed to take charge with Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson being out number 1. I go with Ja'Kai Douglas. There were some grabs there that he made, which I thought were really impressive. Also, of course, that throw from Jordan Travis that went deep with Ja'Kai, that was just a really impressive play, getting your head back and looking for that ball. But it was placed perfectly. They do that in practice every day, and it worked out perfectly there. And also, too, I think Kyle Morlock really stepped up, too, in this game. Florida State was trying to do some things here and there with Jaheim Bell, but Kyle Morlock took that next step, I think, and showed that he can be a pivotal factor in Mike Norvell's offense. But yeah, I can't believe some of the stats are just so weird with at least for Pittsburgh, some certain things that they would do. They tried to go deep, and they did that once. Go back to the almost very beginning of the game where Pittsburgh tried to put up some points, and you see Fentrell Cypress make an Antoine Winfield Jr. play there, punching that ball out. It actually comes back inbounds, recovers there in the end zone for a touchback. That play shaved off 7 points, but also I think a lot of momentum shift there in Florida State's favor, which was much needed.
It was absolutely crucial, and I mean, it kind of gets overlooked now with everything that happened the rest of the ball game. But at that point in the game, I mean, you're looking at Pittsburgh. If they score that one and get the other touchdown, they're potentially up 14-10 going into the half, and instead you've got Fentrell Cypress, who was obviously beat on this play. I mean, it looked like it was going to be an 82-yard Pittsburgh touchdown, but instead he continues to hustle, continues to pursue, doesn't give up on the play, and finally gets there and makes something happen. And, that just goes to show about this defense never giving up. We actually talked about it on Wednesday during the podcast in the practice observations that defensive coordinator Adam Fuller gave some serious praise to Conrad Hussey after he came from the backside of a running play in practice, a play that was a 30 or 40-yard run by Rodney Hill down the sideline. But Hussey pursued from the opposite sideline to push him out of bounds rather than giving up a touchdown, and got some serious praise for that. And that lesson kind of goes right here to what Cypress did. He didn't give up, hustled despite the big play, and got Florida State the football back.
And also a lot of credit to Cypress for realizing that it was a fumble. Because I think everybody else in the building just thought, he went in the end zone, whatever. Cypress was like, I think I got that ball out. Let me get on this. Sure enough, it was a fumble. Just an incredible play by Cypress that honestly saved Florida State the game, because who knows what would have happened if Pitt gets that touchdown plus the touchdown to follow, and they are up 14-10 at half and have that momentum. Instead, Florida State takes a dumpy 10-7 lead into half, and they're able to get some momentum from that and have a great third quarter.
Yeah, looking at some of the stats here, total yards 501 on the day for the Seminoles. The rush game was something too that struggled throughout this game. Of course, you have Trey Benson's big 55-yard touchdown. That's what carries the stat sheet there. But Florida State was struggling with Pittsburgh's front seven. They were doing a great job in the trenches, and Florida State's offensive line, you could tell, some guys dinged up. They've been looking to recover, man. I know a lot of those guys on the interior Florida State really hoping they can get some guys healed up. But, Darius Washington had to play. He also got called with holding, Casey Roddick too. But, throughout the game, it was a struggle there in the trenches to get anything going with Trey Benson, Lawrence Toafili, and it was really primarily those two guys in the backfield in the running back room.
It was a tough game between the tackles for Florida State, especially with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman being out. It just meant Pittsburgh could key on the run even more, and I think we saw that, with them going basically man coverage on the receivers for the majority of the game and just continuing to send pressure, play after play. And, Florida State, they were able to have a little bit of success, but, for the most part, the Panthers did a very good job of limiting that rushing attack. Austin mentioned it before we go live, but Trey Benson has a 55-yard rushing touchdown, and Florida State still finishes below 4 yards a carry, just 3.7 on the day on 37 attempts. So it was an ugly game out there for the most part. The offensive line, like you said, Logan, I think you can tell that there are some guys where the injuries are beginning to pile up a little bit. And, it was a struggle from those guys up front. I'm not sure if Robert Scott played at all. Darius Washington obviously started that left tackle spot. But, I'm not sure if I saw Robert Scott rotate in at all. And if he did, it wasn't very much. So, yeah, a struggle for Florida State on the ground today.
I think Rodney Hill's rushing stat line tells the whole story. 6 carries for 5 yards, but a lawn of 9. It was just like you guys said, the offensive line just wasn't great. I think Pitt had 11 tackles for loss, like you were saying earlier. Yep. It's just very ugly game from the offensive line, and I think it's fair to say they've seen the most regression out of any position unit from last year. And it kind of sucks to see. Granted, there's injuries. Granted, there's not the same continuity because guys are in and out of the lineup, but it's definitely been disappointing.
And it's wild to see that because Rodney Hill was running extremely hard in this game.
He was. That's the first screen pass in, what was it, the second drive of the game, where he just absolutely ran a dude over, and then he did it again in the fourth quarter again. He really is just a baby Isaiah Pacheco because he just runs angry every single time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like his physicality, and you just don't really expect it from Rodney, but because you expect it from Trey Benson. That's what you expect, and then you're like, okay, let me just grab this guy's not 230 pounds like Trey Benson, and nope, yeah, you get run over, and it's not fun by Rodney Hill. But yeah, run game, and you can just definitely tell up front for Florida State, the offensive line. Just not their best day. And, I think it's all relying on some health here. So I got to hope some guys can recover because that was a really physical defense that they faced. And, we talked about in the preview, I have a whole ton of respect for Narduzzi. He knows how to coach. He knows how to put defensive players into the league. And, they played the best they could against a talented Florida State team that were without some of their two biggest weapons on offense. One of their biggest, of course, was Keon Coleman. But you still get the win. You're 24-7 on the road, and like we've been saying throughout the season too, you're going to get anybody's best shot. And when you're the number 4 team in the country, there's ACC championship bursts on the line. There's just so many things that a team is going to create more hunger for to ruin your day. So, or ruin your season overall. But yeah, Florida State gets it done. Watching too at the end of the game, we saw Tate Rodemaker jump in there, which was good. I mean, that I'm excited for Tate Rodemaker next year. Not to like change subject, but I'm excited to see Tate Rodemaker. Some of these throws are right on the money. I mean, that one right over to Vondravius Jacobs where he got hit with targeting there. And Vondravius almost brought that in too. That kid's gonna be special, but that's a rope from Tate Rodemaker. These balls have been put right on the money from him. But J Trav kind of going to the sideline, holding on to his right knee, talk with Mike Norvell. He talks with one of their lead trainers as well. Something to most certainly monitor going into this next week of practice as Florida State prepares for, most likely, if Miami can get it done tonight, if they can get it done against NC State, potential college game day and an 8:00 kickoff in Doak. But something we got to watch for QB1.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only one. A couple guys got dinged up during the course of this game. We saw Lawrence Toafili exit prior to the conclusion to go back to the locker room. And, obviously with Keon Coleman being scratched before this game with an undisclosed injury, going to be interesting to hear if Mike Norvell provides any sort of updates following the game.
And you could tell Dustin Hill, too, is not fully 100% there. He had that big catch, 29 yards, kind of play out of nowhere that Jordan Travis made, the usual J Trav making something out of nothing. And, Dustin Hill swapping over to the other side of the field and getting that 29-yard gain. But that's just not 100% Dustin Hill. And it was easy to watch. He's usually beating multiple other defenders downfield with his speed and elusiveness.
I will say I kind of doubt it on the college game day aspect. Next week's got so many great games, and college game day would just have to decide, we really want to go see Miami, Florida State. Because you have Ole Miss, Georgia, Utah, Washington, Tennessee, Missouri, USC, Oregon to some extent. There's some really good games next week, and I don't know if they'll value FSU, Miami like some of those other games, but we'll see. The offensive line's also going to have to get much healthier this week, like we were kind of talking about. Miami's got a very physical front four. I mean, Ruben Bain's playing as well as any D lineman in the country right now. So they're going to have to get ready for him.
And not only that, but you're going to go up against Miami. Then you've got Florida in 3 weeks. And then you go into the ACC championship, which it looks like as of now, Louisville, the favorite to be the other team in the ACC title game this year, defeated Virginia Tech. So the only team remaining in the ACC with one conference loss, Florida State obviously undefeated in conference play. But I do think you got to give some credit to Pittsburgh for how they played in this game today. We talked about on Wednesday, coming off that 58-7 loss, and with the way some of those comments from Pat Narduzzi got construed, was this team going to come out and play their best game of the season, or were they just going to come lay down? And I mean, Pittsburgh, really, they had the perfect recipe for an upset brewing in that first half with the way their defense was able to limit Florida State's offense. And you think back to that third quarter, I mean, they're maybe an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty away from tying up that game at 10 apiece, and who knows where it goes from there. But Florida State able to respond, and at the end of the day, championship teams find a way, and Florida State, despite trailing 7-0 in this game, scores the final 24 points. I know the 30-point plus streak ends today, but I mean, Florida State 3 yards away from continuing that as well. Finish winning by 17. We're favored by 21 points in this game. So it's going to be interesting to see, how that kind of goes into effect in the AP poll voting tomorrow, and also when the second college football playoff rankings come together on Tuesday night. Because even though they struggled in this game, I mean, Florida State did end up winning it kind of handily.
So I will say the spread moved after the Keon news came out, and it was 17.5 before the game started. So just 1 point away. So if Florida State kicks that field goal instead of the dumbass 4th and 2 Trey Benson run, they would have covered.
Or if they just go for it on that final drive instead of letting the clock run out.
There's definitely some optics to that. It's definitely more realistic to just kick the field goal in the red zone. But who am I to judge?
We need the cover. One unit who I think was a menace for Pittsburgh's offense was that linebacker room. I thought Tatum Bethune, Kalen DeLoach, DJ Lundy were absolutely everywhere. I thought this was one of their best games, providing pressure, almost forcing a fumble there. He did, Kalen DeLoach did with that pop Like they set the tone throughout the game. And DJ Lundy too, man, he continues to make plays on defense for the last couple of weeks for the Seminoles. I thought that whole unit, to me, gets a ton of credit for setting the tone defensively and maybe for the team overall. They came to play this Saturday afternoon against the Panthers.
Yeah, you could definitely see the way Kalen and Tatum Bethune were flying around. They had a couple of missed tackles and a couple of bad angles on a few plays, but for the most part, I mean, they were both very impactful. And then up front on the defensive line, Braden Fisk gets his first sack since transferring to Florida State. Got a big hug from Odell on the sidelines after that and a smile. You don't see many of those. So I thought for the most part, Florida State's defense, I mean, in this game, matched up to the level of physicality from Pittsburgh's offensive line, and I mean, did a really good job of limiting the Panthers for the most part. We talked about turnovers and Florida State able to force 3 of them. I know you mentioned Conrad Hussey getting that interception and forced fumble earlier in the show, and I mean, overall, big outing from this unit. There were some struggles at times. I know Akeem Dent, had a missed tackle. Patrick Payton had a missed tackle and had that penalty. But I mean, for the 4th or 5th straight week, a very solid outing for this defense. Actually, Pittsburgh's 333 yards, the most that FSU has given up in the last 4 games.
And still below 50% completion. I know Vayer, I still hate saying that. I know Vayer had almost 250 yards passing, but a lot of them were just, he's rolling backwards, throwing it off his back foot up for grabs, and it somehow falls into Pitt's hands, and he still completes just 43% of his passes. I thought it was, like you said, overall very good performance by the entire defense. Got to give a lot of love to Braden Fisk, even though his stat line is only going to have 1 tackle for loss. It seems like he was constantly getting pressure, pushing the guard back in the quarterback's lap. I just felt like he did a very good job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he went for 15 of 35, 244 yards, 1 touchdown, and that interception there. Florida State putting themselves in the right position a lot of times defensively. And so did too Pittsburgh at the beginning of the game, and I think throughout it too. The defense showed up definitely in the secondary. They had tight coverage and were causing a lot of deflections. They were in coverage nicely on a lot of Florida State's weapons offensively. So, but yeah, still for offensively, Bayer couldn't really do much whenever you have Braden Fisk. You have Farmer kind of disrupting on the middle, coming up on the inside. It just caused concern. And two, something that we'll look into kind of this week. It was good to see him back in the game, though. But Jared Verse, too, went down. Every FSU fan was about to faint and pass out, and as they should. Such an impactful player, leader, everything. It's Jared Verse. What he brings to the table is ridiculous. But he came back. He's good, which is really good to see. That's 2 back-to-back weeks where FSU fans are almost having heart attacks, man. It's scary out here. And then you have Jay Trav grabbing his knee, going to the sideline, man. It's like it just builds stress for fans going into the next week in the game.
I just want to know what the Pitt player said whenever Verse was down that drew that penalty.
Same, because that was a big penalty at that point in the game.
I mean, clearly it had to be
out of field goal range.
It had to be something pretty bad, because before the ref threw the flag, I noticed that the team, or like the coaches and staff standing in front of him right there, had started to turn their heads around whenever he said whatever he said. I mean,
and the head official looked right at him and just like followed him down the sideline and threw the flag. I was like, he must have said something. This is why we need refs to have post-game conferences, so we can ask stuff like this.
We'll never know, but I mean, man, it had to be something.
What that was their tight end, right? Who was talking shit?
Gavin Bartholomew, I think it was.
So
Long last name.
He probably had a couple plays where he was having to go against Jared, and Jared has told us, he's told the media, he likes to chirp a little bit. I mean, we had him for his interview whenever he was transferring over to Florida State on here. And, he said he's a guy that likes to talk trash and back it up. And, he does that throughout games. And so I'm sure he got into his ear and triggered him up a little bit. But see what it does, though? It earns Florida State pushing Pittsburgh back another 15 yards. And it really eliminated 3 points, for Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And so that was huge.
I do want to give Ja'Kai Douglas some love in this game. A career-high 6 catches for 115 yards. Had that nice catch on the drive that ended up getting Florida State their first touchdown in the game, and just overall was consistently making plays in the receiving game. A guy who, has struggled the last couple of weeks as he's worked his way back into the lineup from injuries. And, it was good to see him break out, especially after this week of practice. Had some drops in practice. So to see him come through with a big game and an area where Florida State really needed him to step up was absolutely huge. But at the same time, I mean, there were some big struggles on the special team side of the ball, especially early in the game with not fair catching the ball and allowing to bounce. Obviously that one possession Florida State got pinned back at the 1 and just a couple of times. I mean, just losing a ton of yardage from those punts, something that we saw, the last couple of years before Florida State had Micah Pittman and Keon Coleman back there fielding these punts. It kind of just felt like a flashback to 2020 and 2021 when there were some real struggles at the position. Got to give him a little credit because he responded, finally started fair catching some of those as the game went on. Did have the one that he muffed, but I mean, overall, it was a tough outing for Florida State on special teams.
I mean, even just for Ja'Kai Douglas in general, it started out slow because they targeted him twice on some jump ball opportunities. Like, why are we throwing a jump ball to a 5'9" slot receiver? And throughout the game, the timing was there a little bit more. You mentioned the slot fade to him at the end of the first half, potentially. I can't remember exactly when it was. But I will still stand by. I hate the play call. 3rd and 3, and we're throwing a slot fade. But it was a great adjustment by Ja'Kai Douglas to come down with the play. It's a great throw by Jordan Travis. And, we were all wondering who was going to step up with Johnny Wilson out and then Keon Coleman out. Ja'Kai Douglas had a big game. I wish we saw more Tron. I think he was only targeted once, maybe twice. I can't really remember off the top of my head, and it's not shown on stat broadcast, sadly, but really would have loved to see more of him.
And I'd be interested to see or to hear, and I'm not sure if we will get this information from the coaching staff, but just how long was it prior to this game against Pittsburgh? Did they figure out that Keon Coleman was going to be unavailable for this one, and how much did it adjust the game plan? Because at least early on, I mean, it was extremely conservative for Florida State.
So bland. Oh my God.
Tight end screens. I mean, you had Jaheim, Marquiston, and Morlock all catch a tight end screen before the conclusion of the second quarter. Running back screens, runs up the middle, a random flea flicker. It was just kind of all over the place. Like you said, Austin, some throws on the outside and one-on-one coverage to shorter wide receivers. So I'd just be interested to see, how long was it before this game did Florida State learn they weren't going to have Keon? I mean, obviously, we can't say a ton from practice, but I mean, there were some stuff that we noticed throughout the week in practice that made us wonder if Coleman would be available for this game. We figured he'd be able to suit up after the last couple of weeks. Obviously, he did not play today, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's back this upcoming week against Miami.
Jordan Travis had 25 pass attempts in the first half. I want to say 7 of them were screens. I was losing my mind.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh was figuring that out pretty easily.
Yep.
Question on Sumo from Sumo on Facebook. We're not going to lose, but if we did, are we still in the ACC championship? Everything's locked in as official. Florida State is in Charlotte. Now it's just depending on who they will be facing, but they've done their job. They've locked it in. They're 9-0. They did what they need to do in the ACC. And, it's kind of easy at this rate of how many times, Florida State having a game every week. We kind of overlook some things that they've done throughout this season. And there's so many things that they've broken record-wise, and just looking at what Mike Norvell has done. And I don't think the national media has fully yet, until they probably either win the ACC championship or once they get into, their PR run with making the college football playoff and they get a lot of media attention. Really just going back and us being able to go on here as a show to reflect on what Mike Norvell had to do year by year by year to get to this point, to reach the 2023 ACC championship it's incredible. It really is. Some of the things that we used to come on here and talk about, guys, about this locker room, the culture, some things that we would hear, some things that were being told to us internally from that program that just sounded like it could be 5 years, 6 years, 7 years before Florida State could turn this thing around. For Mike Norvell to do this in 3 years and show what kind of culture he's been able to shift. And I like how the broadcast, one of the good things that they talked about, had a good line there about, Florida State, they pick who they want in that transfer portal, and Mike Norvell and that staff has perfected that process. And some of these players coming in for their first year, just months on campus, and making such a massive impact. Keon Coleman coming in doing this, Jared Verse, and so many others. Trey Benson. It's astonishing. I think the national media got to give a lot more credit to Mike Norvell. It's stunning.
I don't think the job can be understated about what he's done in Tallahassee. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, back in 2021 when Florida State was 0-4, and we were all wondering, is Mike Norvell going to be the guy? Is Florida State going to have to go look for another coach? And since then, Florida State 24-6, and just a complete and total turnaround for Florida State these last couple of years. And it's come through the transfer portal. It's come through development of guys that were on the roster before Norvell even arrived in Tallahassee. It's come through his recruiting efforts as well. Classes that maybe haven't been as higher ranked, but we've seen some serious contributors emerge from those ranks. And then now we're seeing in this 2024 class, them currently sitting among the top 5 recruiting classes in the country, that success finally paying off at the prep level recruiting as well. So, I mean, just in all facets, you look at the way the locker room is developed on the field, the recruiting efforts, the coaching staff that's in place right now. There's a ton of stability and success going on at Florida State. And, it just feels like the Seminoles are going to continue to climb.
We all thought Norvell had it in him to build this team the right way. But, like Logan was saying, after that 0-4 start, we didn't know if he was going to get the time. And to see the run Florida State's had since then, like you just mentioned, 24-6, super, super impressive. It's light years ahead of where we thought they would be at this point in the rebuild. 9-0, ACC championship appearance already clinched. You're top 4 in the college football playoffs. If you keep winning, you're in. I don't think anyone would have thought that sitting 0-4 in 2021.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of things had to go through to get done, and they've done that. A lot of good stuff off the field too, academically as well. No off the field, bad things happening. It's just a lot of things that go in with it, and I think it's super impressive because you're bringing in all these transfers and it's changing. You have so many different personalities coming in, and you're hoping that they can mesh in such a quick, short amount of time. And they do that, and they beat LSU right off the bat using Jaheim Bell, first-year transfer, Keon Coleman, first-year transfer. It's really, really cool to see. And, shout out to what Mike Norvell and the staff have been able to do. But, Florida State wins 24-7 tonight, though. Miami in just about 10 minutes or so will face on the road in Raleigh against NC State. I know a lot of FSU fans will be monitoring that game just because, like I was saying earlier, if Miami does win that, there is a chance that Florida State will have College Game Day in town. Will certainly be a primetime matchup no matter what, even if College Game Day is not there. If Miami does what they need to do, this will be a night kickoff. And Doak, I'm looking forward to being up there next weekend. But we'll see what the Hurricanes and Mario Cristobal decide to do. You never know what kind of team wants to show up on Saturday under Cristobal, but they've got a squad, and I think Miami would love to ruin everything. So in Florida, you still got your 2 main rivals that you've got to face before the season's over with Florida and Miami. So still some challenges ahead, no matter what. But you get the Hurricanes at home, and you get the Gators in Gainesville, which will be there in attendance for to cover as well in a few weeks.
Miami playing at NC State tonight, so that's a place I don't want to be playing on a Saturday night. We'll see how that goes for the Hurricanes. Florida obviously upset at home earlier today by Arkansas in Gainesville. First victory for the Razorbacks ever at Florida. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks as Florida State gets into these rivalry games.
There's a chance Florida's fighting for their bowl eligibility when they welcome Florida State to town, because they're 5-4 right now. They play at LSU next week, at Missouri the week after that, and then play Florida State. So they may be playing with something or with a lot to prove. The loss to Arkansas today was really their best chance to get bowl eligible, and now they really have to scrap and claw. And to your point about Miami, there are a few places in college football worse than Carter Finley Stadium in Raleigh.
Nightmares.
Just horrible fans, horrible stadium.
And NC State's coming off the win over Clemson, so you got a little momentum there. Be interesting, though, because if Miami wins this one, you're looking at 3 straight victories, or is it even 4 straight victories for the Hurricanes coming into Doak, and maybe they sneak into that top 25, have a ranked matchup next Saturday.
It would be 3 because they've had 2 straight overtime wins over Clemson and Virginia since losing to UNC.
And then Jimbo Fisher loses today. in the last 2 minutes facing Ole Miss. And then Dabo Swinney with an incredible quote at the end saying, if you're going to do it now, buy stock in Clemson football. Brother,
You got to
it's
buy
November
stock when
4th,
it's
my
down,
man. That's November 4th. It's too early. Market's closed, dog. It's over. It's over.
At least Clemson showed it is still very hard to win in Death Valley.
Yep, and coaches still get pissed off about fans. They hold that on them. He probably wrote it down on his mirror and everything. That fan that called him, that ticked him off, he showed him today. He showed that fan.
And I believe Clemson's next 2 games are at home as well. So they've, maybe they go on a little run and get to a little bit of a respectable record.
And how does strength of schedule go from here? Because it took Ohio State a walk-off play to beat Notre Dame. And then Clemson, pretty much easily handles Notre Dame for the most part.
Easily is a stretch. That game got a little hairy there at the end because Clemson had the game won and then they fumbled it with like a minute 45 left.
Clemson almost Clemson, but did not Clemson.
Yeah,
they were trying they were trying their hardest to Clemson, but Notre Dame more.
Yeah, 100%. But yep. Well, we got to bounce out of here because the Celtics play VZ, and Dustin's got to get over there and watch his Boston Celtics. But we've been on here for 30 minutes. A great instant reaction. It's nice for all of us to be on here next week. It will still be us because I will be in attendance for the game. So we'll be from inside Doak Campbell Stadium on Bobby Bowden Field, giving our instant reaction to Florida State versus Miami. But before that, next week at Wednesday, we'll be previewing the game. Hopefully we'll be able to have a guest on too to give us some good insight into the Hurricanes. But Florida State is headed to the ACC championship in Charlotte. 24-7, beat the Pittsburgh Panthers. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, before you bounce out of here, hit the like button, share with your friends, hit the subscribe button too. Tons of content going out there fluidly all throughout the week. So make sure you guys are staying tuned on there. But yeah, that's going to do it for us on Hear the Spirit. Everybody enjoy the rest of y'all's weekend, and we'll talk to you guys next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Peace.